Okay, big updates in the Brownlow front. So I've managed to connect my player stats for every game into the Brownlow sheet. It's one integration. The other thing I also did was I managed to integrate AFL tables and all of their votes into the sheet as well, which means that basically at the end of every year I just need to go to this link here, paste in everything into there, go to this link here, paste in all the names there. Sometimes AFL tables, for example, use Zach Merritt rather than Zachary Merritt, which is used by FootyWire. So I just need to fix those. But let's say at the end of every year, it takes me 15 to 20 minutes to get all the vote data in. It'll spit it into this. And then ultimately what happens is, this should look somewhat familiar. Okay, this is where we're doing our vote entry last year. This is new and I'll talk about it, but we would put our vote entry in here. We would calculate everything here. Now I'm actually getting an actual value as well for at the end of the year, which is coming out of the actual vote entries that are supplied by AFL tables. They don't do a projection, unfortunately. They just capture stats. I'll first just show you how to use the sheet. First thing I've done is I've made this dynamic now, and I won't change it because it'll do a lot of calculations, but all of this 50-50 right now is controlled from this spot here. If I made that 60, this would automatically become 40, and it would be a 60-40 split when we're doing the averages. So that's all the same. I've put in some little menu here which doesn't work in the web for some reason. Yes, it does. Okay. Seems to be one behind. It works better in Excel for some reason, not in this. I don't know why that is. Anyway, that's fine. I'll fix that. That's basically allow you to navigate to the different rounds and to the report at the end. Just making it easier. I think that link's just broken. Just making it easier to go to the different rounds without having to scroll across. Key fields. Okay, we obviously need to put the teams in as well. That actually doesn't really get used, other than so that we know which game we're actually talking about. So I'm not using that as data, but it is important for, I guess, for our notation. I've increased the size of the match notes field now, so there's quite a bit of stuff you can put in there. This works a little bit better than it did last year. So now if I want, let's say this is Carlton Richmond, let's say I wanted to add in here Zach Williams. Okay, Williams, Zachary. Okay, I go and grab him. Now he didn't play this game, bad example. Maybe someone else like Harry Mackay. Okay, so you can see there, as soon as I grab him, it goes and gets his super coach from that round one game, Carlton Richmond. So it tells me he got 60 super coach, 13 disposals, no clearances, 6 inside 50s, 1 goal assist, and 1 goal. I would love to have replaced this with contested possessions, but unfortunately in my data entry I don't have it. And there's probably no other stats that appear to matter that much. I don't think inside 50 matters that much either. From what I've seen in my research, which I'll show you in a little bit, the main thing, like marks are almost irrelevant. The main things are disposals, goals, somewhat goal assists, clearances have an impact. And there is actually a little bit of a correlation with Supercoach as well, which is why I've put those in there. So let me just pull that out. So actually you can see there, I'll just show this working as well. So if I remove Shy Bolton from here, you'll see that the actual disappeared. It tells me I'm missing 3 votes for this round. Go back in, put in Shy. And what it does is it actually looks for him in the other table, the AFL table, and it assigns the 3 votes there. So you actually see it was a really weird 3-vote game, okay? With the reason why no one gave him votes, because he had 18 touches and a goal assist and a goal. So I'm not sure why he actually got 3, but that's one of those abnormalities. There is actually, if I go across here, I can show you an example. I've got all these calculations happening in the background here, so these will be hidden normally and they don't actually function until after the season's finished. But what it lets me do is say, okay, for this particular player here, we were 0.5 under on Bontempelli. Okay, we gave him 2.5, he got 3. AFL were perfect, Betfair were under, ESPN under, and BYB and Wheelo perfect. And our average at 2.65 is a little bit under. And I do this for every single game of every round. What that lets me do is it lets me calculate stats or performance of the different counts round by round, and it lets me roll them up across the entire year. And I can look at them by 3 vote, 2 vote, 1 vote, all votes, and I'll show you that in the report section at the end of the page. So, which I might just jump to now. So if I go to reports, okay. Don't worry about this. This is something I'm going to show you later, as well as a vote estimator. So if we actually have a look at these tables, they tell us a little bit of a story about how the performance actually happened across the counts. And I might just zoom in a little bit just to make this easier for you to read. It's probably a bad idea because now you can't read the whole thing. Alright, so what these 0.25, 1.25 and 2.25 mean, it means it's within this margin of error. So what we're saying here is across the season, if we consider all votes, so 3, 2 and 1 votes when we assign them, we were within 0.25%. So if it was 1, we were either up to 1.25 or down to 0.75 20% of the time. We were within 1.25 of the correct vote 72% of the time, and we were within 2.25 96% of the time. And you expect that number to be high because that's a pretty big margin for error, and you actually can't even achieve that on a 2 vote because the biggest error is obviously 2. So if we look at a comparison, so in terms of the most accurate, okay, the worst was ESPN. ESPN are only 17% of the time are almost dead on at very low margin. If you compare that with our average, it's actually, the average is actually up at 40%. Now, to be fair, that's a little bit misleading because the average gives 0 and nobody else gives 0, so that gets skewed a little bit. I wouldn't pay too much attention to this. You can see here the count on the average. Well, that's wrong. I shouldn't say max, but I'll fix that. That should be BYB and Wheelo. You can see the count here on the average is high. Don't worry about why. Okay. The key thing is though is that if you look at the performance of different counts against one another, you can see here ESPN is the worst in terms of being highly accurate, but they're not the worst in terms of being fairly accurate. And it actually flips around. AFL are highly accurate and then actually become the worst in terms of making big errors. Part of that is because they give 3, 2, 1 as opposed to these ones being allowed to distribute, 0.5 in the case of ESPN and Betfair, and Wheelo going into decimal places, which is what helps them to be more accurate. If we focus on the 3 vote, this is a better example here. This is where the average actually becomes relevant. So Wheelo is the worst in terms of accuracy in 3 votes, at only 38% of the time being almost dead on accurate, whereas internally about 44%. AFL are actually apparently the best at picking 3 votes. 55% of the time when they give 3 votes, it's perfect. Our average is about 53%, so we're not losing too much there. When it comes to being within 1 vote of 3 votes, so it means you've probably given them. This means, let's see, if you've got an error of 1.25, it means that you've given them something like 1.75 at least. The average is the best at 79%. The worst was BYB at 69%. And then basically this means if they were meant to get 3, you basically have to give them at least something. And 89% of the time our average gave them something. AFL are the worst offender. So 20% of the time when they were meant to get 3 votes, they gave them nothing. And you flip that around, they are both the most accurate and the least accurate on 3 votes. And that is why the average is always the winner, because it takes out the the randomness of the counts and sort of blends the best and the worst of them together to be something reasonable. If we look at 2 votes, it was actually, in terms of perfect BYB, 25% of the time were perfect. We're within 1 vote, 62% of the time as the best one, and then everyone has to be within 100% there. Again, the average is performing just under there, but performing quite well. And then we go to 1 vote, and actually, interestingly, this is where our average starts to tail away. However, you'd rather be weaker on 1 vote than 3 votes, because 3 votes is where the big errors come from and the big discrepancies in the count. AFL, the most accurate with the 1 vote is Betfair by a decent margin, extra 5% over our average. Okay, ESPN are maybe dragging us down there. Our internal is also not great there. Being within 1.25 votes of 1, so that means basically we've given them roughly a 2 when they've got a 1. Okay. Again, most of us are relatively good there. We either give them 0 or 2. It basically means the inverse here is 11% of the time we gave a guy 3 when they should have got 1. They've done it only 8%. Okay, so they're quite good at not giving 3 votes to 1. Our average count, and this is because we probably haven't given them 3. This would mean we've given them like 2.3 would trigger that error, for example, because you'd be 1.3 above the average. So anyway, what I've got is I've got this round by round by round. I can see how well we performed every round. I haven't really looked into that yet. But as a whole, the average is probably the best of all the outcomes. And there is no true worst, because as I said, those that are good at 3 are bad at 1. Those are good at 1 are bad at 3. It kind of balances itself out. If we go across to the next bit of data, I'll come back to this actually, because I will show you how to use this in a minute. I want to go into count comparison. So this is where it gets quite interesting. Zoom out a little bit. So what we've got is every player, what the number of votes we gave them, like as the individual counts, what the average was, their min, their max, and then the actual here. So you can see here, for example, Jordan Dawson was given somewhere between 19 and 24.5. His actual was 20, and this is showing the error for each count. Red being AFL gave 5 over, light blue BYB giving them 1 under, and I've rounded these off, right? And that actually allows me to rank every player by error, by the margin of the error. And this over here is a top 18 of our errors. Our worst 2 players were Chera and Brad Crouch for opposite reasons. We gave Adam Chera 10 too many. We gave Brad Crouch 10 too few. And then we work our way down the list. Okay, DeGoey, Oliver, Viney, we undercooked. Horn Francis, we undercooked. So just a bit of data there to see how we're actually tracking. We know that we're a bit over on Tim Taranto as well, and that cost us. We know about this one, right? That almost destroyed us. So what does this do? That lets us see by player, but these are the interesting tables here. So I'll just zoom in and dig into them a little bit and try and explain them. So the black ones here are all players exact error and all players within error range, and I'll discuss that in a minute. And the blue ones are players where the minimum vote was 0. So the total count of players was 802 this season. The number of players who actually were given more than a vote. Now I have to, what is it? J. So what we're saying there is we had 161 out of the 802 players where we expected the minimum to be at least 1, right? So that basically 640 of the players are irrelevant to us because, well, most guys don't get a vote. Basically, only 1 in 5 players actually really have a chance of polling at some point during the season. So if you just look at things with all players, it can skew it because it's obvious that Lockie Plowman won't get a vote. And that is counting towards your accuracy, but that's not what we care about. We care about Lockie Neal. We care about, Dom Sheed sometimes. So it's probably more important to focus on these tables rather than this one. So I'm actually going to leave them out completely. Right, so exact error. So what this is saying is what percentage of the time were we perfect, and that is within, I think it's within 0.25 again, either side. No, actually, it's using these errors here, so it's rounded, right? So this is the percentage of the time we got them perfect, percentage of the time we were either 1 above or below, 2 above or below, 3 above or below, 4 above or below, and 5. So if we focus on this for a second on the 0, average was perfect 17% of the time, AFL 16, Betfair rarely perfect, but that's because they give too many 0.5s. That's what's hurting them. Wheelo is actually surprising. They got 12%, given they give decimals. Although there is rounding going on, so let's factor that in. Within 1 vote, okay, or 1 vote out, Betfair and us, okay, about 30, 32, 35%. The average was down at 25% there, but that's okay because these are not cumulative, okay? It's actually bad to have a high count where you're 5 or more over. What that's saying is 17% of these 161 players at AFL was either 5 high or 5 low, as opposed to our average only being down at 12. All right, so this is just basically, from this point forward, you want to see lower percentages are good. This is the key. These two here are the key. Are you within 0? Are you within 1? And that's sort of showing how really accurate you are. We can probably accept even within 2, to be fair. And that's where our average starts to catch up as well. Now this is probably a more interesting table, players within error range. And what you'll see is the percentages will climb. You can see here that obviously everyone's count for every player were within 5 plus. Okay, because that just obviously, you know, if you're 10 out, you're still captured in the 5 plus error. So you can almost ignore that column. So again, these columns are the same because this is, you know, all the internal, 9% of the time, the error range was 0. So what we start to see now is a climb. So now we're saying 42% of the time, these 161 players that were expected to poll were within 1 vote of error on ours. AFL, very similar. Worst performer is BYB there. The average is tracking pretty well. Now if we look at where they're plus or minus 2 against their expected, okay, average starts to pull ahead here. BYB probably is the worst count based on this, okay. If you want to look for a bad count, BYB is probably the worst. We're okay, we're mid-pack, okay. If you go to 3, we're at 76. We're now starting to get to the top of the internal counts, and you have a look at the average, it's now 83%. So it's now pulling away from these ones, and it continues to pull away with the 4 as well. So this line here is the thing that tells me that our average is better in terms of not being too far out against the players count than any of the individual accounts combined. Given the fact that it is green, it's higher than all of these in all situations. And you can see if you consider all players, it's obviously still ahead. Now, remember I said there, if you look at all players, we were within 1 vote of the correct amount of votes 85% of the time. Again, that's because there's 600 players in the league where you say 0 and they're like $1 to be 0, which is making that number higher. So this basically connecting up the AFL tables votes into the system has basically let me produce both this. Let's us have a look at these players we're individually bad with, and it allows the calculation of round by round and season by season performance for the different counts. Here's the fun part. This was what I was working on last night. So I should caveat, this data set here is looking at 2023 statistics only, and I've only filled in to round 17, so I need to go and put the other 7 rounds in. And then in future, I'll have it look into multiple years. What this is saying here is if you get a Supercoach score of 170 was achieved 12 times, win, lose, or draw, it doesn't matter, okay? It's 12 times players scored above 170. In those 12 occasions, those players received 31 votes, which was an average of 2.6. All right. So what you can basically infer from that is that when a player scores 170 in Supercoach, they get votes, right? And we know that it's a good game, and then average 2.6. Then if you break it down even further, 75% of the time, so 8 out of the 12 times, that player got 3 votes. 17% of the time, which is probably 2 out of the 12, they got 2 votes. They never got 1 vote, and that's probably 3 actually, not 2. That's 3, and does that add up? It should. Yeah, it does. One of the times, a player got 170 in Supercoach and didn't get a vote. However, you can infer from this that if you get 170, you're pretty likely to get 3 votes. Now, I do have across here the exact same calculations for win. You can see 8 times it happened in a win, 100% of the time they got 3 votes. The 4 times it happened in a loss, most of the time, or half the time, they got 2 votes. 1 time they got 3. 1 time they got none. So the result of the match definitely impacts that outcome. I've just done it for 160, 150, 140. So this is greater than 160, or equal to or greater than 150, 140. Okay, so these are just like bands, basically. I do have something over here, which I'll show you in a minute, which allows us to drill down even further. Okay, so that's Supercoach. I also did the same thing for disposals, and I set the bands at 40, 36, 32, and 28, because underneath I don't really care. So if you look at it, 10 times a player got 40 or more, okay, there's average of 2.1 votes on every occasion. 70% of the time it's 3, which is crazy, and 30% of the time they got nothing. If you go across to in the win, some poor unlucky bastard, it happened 6 times in a win, some guy got 40 touches and didn't get a vote. The other 5 got 3 votes every time. When you lose, you're a 50-50 to get 3 votes or nothing. So there's no guarantee. The result is the big indicator. As you work down through the disposals, you can see the average votes dropping, and you can see that you're more and more likely to get no votes, particularly in a loss, right? Wait, sorry, that's in a win. In a loss, you can get 36, and half of the time they didn't get a vote. So remember, at this point, this table is only looking at one statistic. They may have kicked, 5 goals as well. It's not factoring that in. It's only looking for the disposals at this point. If we look at, I've done the same with clearances, okay? Clearances basically say it's only happened once, but if you get 15 clearances, then you're going to get 3 votes. If you get 13, you're an 80% chance of getting at least 2. Similarly for goals, okay, I've done 7, 6, 5, 4. 5 times a player kicks 7 goals or more, 80% of the time it's 3 votes. If not the 3, then it's going to be the 2. When you go to 6, the likelihood of 3 drops to 62%. 5 and 4 almost means nothing. Okay, even in a win, 4 goals only 21% of the time get you 3 votes. Now, obviously, there's other factors that need to be considered here about what happened with the other players in the game. Did one guy kick 6, another guy kicked 4, and that's why 4 didn't get 3 votes? I can't go through all those situations. This is a guide only, and when we have enough data, that will sort of wash itself out anyway. Now I start going into compound stuff. Okay, so 40 disposals and 10 clearances happen 3 times, 100% every time. 35 and 10 clearances, 60% of the time you're getting 3 votes. Okay, in a win, that's 83% of the time. So the 10 clearances, or high number of clearances, appears to be an indicator when combined with disposals. You can even see it here, right? Like it does 9 clearances on its own, it doesn't do much. But if you get 10 clearances, I could even make that 10, to be honest, just to show you, right? 24% of the time, if you get 10 clearances, you get 3 votes. If you stack 30 disposals on that, then that goes up by 17%. Okay, despite the fact that 30 disposals is unlikely to get you much. So this is starting to compound the stats together. Now I start compounding disposals and goals. Okay, 35 and 3 goals happen twice. 100% of the time, 3 votes. 35 and 2 goals happen 10 times. Half of the time, you get 3 votes. 67% of the time if you're the winning team. You can see here 30 and 3 goals 75% of the time appears, and as we expect, is worth more than 35 and 2. This is a bit of an abnormality, possibly. Like 25 and 3 goals in a win 80% of the time. So 10 guys have done that in a win. They usually if you kick 25 touches and 3 goals, you're going to get either 3 or 2. If you don't kick that third goal, your percentage of getting 3 gets cut in half, basically. And you can see there, this is an interesting one, 20 and 4, okay? In a win, 20 and 4 will only get you 3 votes half the time. And in a loss, only 1/3 of the time. And you look at that, 20 goals and 4 happens 6 times. You're just as likely to get 3, 1, and 0. So this is basically a table that does that. It helps it when you've got a decision to make. Okay, I don't know who to give these votes to. You can go to this and it helps to guide as to what normally happens when a guy achieves that level of statistic. That's where this comes in. Okay, so this is where we can be hyper specific. So let's take the game of Jordan De Goey here, right? So he's had a super coach of 130. He's had 25 disposals, 5 clearances, 3 goals, 3 goal assists, and let's assume they won this game, okay? And you see here, it's only happened once, and the guy got 3 votes, and that was him, right? Now, the problem is you don't want things that are only occurring once. So what you might want to actually do is try and set that range and say, okay, what about, what if I put a range of like somewhere between like 22 and 26? You can see it's still only happened once. It's actually the goal assists that are doing it, right? And the goals. So this lets me play with a range and say, okay, let me take the super coach out. Between 22 and 26 disposals, 5 clearances, and between 2 and 3 goals happened 4 times in a win. Okay, you can basically expect 3 votes. If it was a loss, that's going to drop to 25%. And if you don't care about the result, it's 50-50. So this min-max here basically lets you look at a player's stats and set a minimum value and a maximum value, and obviously what they got should be somewhere in there. You can try and put exact stats in. So if you have a guy that gets 140 super coach, let's say he gets 30 disposals, let's say between 30 and 35, just so we don't get no results. Let's ignore the clearances, and he kicks 1 goal, right? In a win. Happened 19 times that a player got at least 140 between 30 and 35 and kicked a goal. 50% of the time that's a 3 vote. 26% of the time it's a 2 vote. Now if we know this player actually got, let's say he got 32 and we bump that up, okay, you're now up to 58% of the time. Let's say he actually kicked 2 goals, right? It's happened 3 times and they've got 3 votes every time. So this tool, if we learn to use it properly, basically looks into the database and finds all the games, players where these things have happened, and then says, well, when this has happened in the past, this is how many votes I usually get. So I'm hopeful that that's going to improve our ability to put in an internal score under some scenarios where we're a little bit confused as to what to do. And as we know, that is 50% of this, which will hopefully drive up the accuracy for next year. The other thing I will say quickly is that I have also connected this up. Okay, you can now see that each round shows the actual in here. It shows the actual count here as well, but it's all still working again. All the live tracker is still connected up, which doesn't really care about actual, and all of the other betting stuff is all still working as well. So getting very close to publishing this, but it's now we've got those extra tools with the ability to drag in the actual stats, to review historic stats from the season before, and then to properly analyze the results at the end of the year. Not that analysis means much, I think, because it might mean that we adjust the weighting a little bit, because I can play with these now. If we start to become much better than their counts, maybe I'll push this up to 60-40, something like that. But I mean, that's a dangerous game because you're only as good as your last vote. But that's all for now.